wonderful Claudia Hodgson-Rodriquez. She is a personal trainer at The Cut Gym in London. She's also a bikini competitor and model. And as we were talking about off camera, Claudia, we are both graduates of the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, although I will have to admit at very different times. We're trying to figure out when you graduated. Have we sort of worked out the maths on that yet?
Yeah, it was 2017.
2017. Okay. Well, I was there in 1912, and so I just missed you. No, I left in 2010. You know, my wife is also a graduate of the stage management course. I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't know. So
Yeah.
she did stage management.
She did. Yeah, we actually met at the Guildhall. Part of the reason I like going back there, as we were just chatting about, is I just have so many fond memories of my time at the Guildhall, and of course, one of them, I guess the main one, was meeting her. Yeah, she was at the stage management on the stage management course at the same time I was at the opera school.
Oh wow! So did you work together on productions? Is that how you met?
We did.
Or was it? Yeah.
We kind of met as you just meet people. We sort of in a coffee shop or in the basement, very romantic. Yeah. For those who don't know, the Guildhall, the basement is like the student union bar. It sells very cheap alcohol and has very sticky floors, but it's wonderful.
Oh my goodness, yeah, the floors.
Did you spend much time there? Were you a basement dweller?
I was, yeah.
No.
Especially in my first year, because you know you're living in the Sundial Court, so that's your student halls. So you're kind of engrossed in that whole, uni life. So you go to, Guildhall during the day, you come back, and everyone's going to the basement. So for you to actually spend time with anyone, you end up going down there and drinking the, as you said, cheap, nasty gin tonic. Goodness me.
It's and actually when I was there, the Barbican was far less built up than it currently is. So actually for us, it was one of the few options. It was either that or like a really overpriced, like sort of city boy bar that none of us could afford to go to anyway.
Yeah.
Actually, I remember one time a friend of mine, I think there were like 50 or 60 people it was, a quiet night in the basement. And there were about 50 or 60 people. And we bought a round for everyone in the basement. And it cost like £40 or something. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Claudia, we want to talk about, I want to talk about two really specific things today with you. The first is the interaction between exercise and performance, and particularly singing. And I know you have a keen interest in this, both from your experience as a trainer and an athlete yourself, and from your experience at the Guildhall, working with performers and singers. And then I also really would love to talk about this brilliant article you wrote about training and energy levels during the menstrual cycle, which personally I found really eye-opening. And I'm quite certain could also be quite valuable for performers and singers, if that's okay.
Absolutely, yes.
So, but firstly, and most importantly, what are we eating today? Can you talk us through this delicious overnight?
This morning, in my little Tupperware, we've got overnight oats. So I prepared these last night because I've had two back-to-back clients this morning, so I needed to make sure I had a little snack for this. So I've got oats with, I've got lactose-free milk in here with peanut butter and blueberries. So yeah, this is my go-to morning snack all day, every day.
This is something you'd have like just all the time. This is kind of like a real go-to. This is delicious. I won't lie. Say that again, sorry.
Have you got any toppings on yours?
I actually cheated because I'm a sweet tooth, despite my best efforts. So I have oats. We have a fight in my house about what oats you should use. I like the big jumbo daddy oats. Whereas my wife quite likes the sort of more refined ones that make it more of a sort of porridge. Do you have a preference? Do you have a?
I'm the same as you, jumbo oats.
Jumbo oats, right?
All the way. Scottish jumbo oats.
Of course. Oh yeah, this is the food of our people, right?
Exactly.
And I've got blueberries, and I have just normal semi-skim milk.
Nice.
I also have a bit of cinnamon and honey in mine.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, I'm a sweet tooth, so not a ton of honey, like, I don't know, 5 to 10 grams, but just enough to give it a bit of sweetness. I wanted to ask you, and this is kind of leading into your life as a trainer and a fitness bikini competitor. One thing I noticed about this meal is a sort of lack in a sort of fundamental protein. You know, there's no Greek yogurt, or there's no sort of protein shake on the side, or boiled eggs. I wanted to ask you, you know, because obviously protein is sort of the trendy macronutrient now. You know, you can get Snickers bars with 25 grams of protein in them, sort of thing.
Yeah.
You know, I personally think it's a little bit overdone. I don't think we need to sort of guzzle down as much protein as maybe some people suggest. What's the sort of rationale behind the no protein of this meal?
So sometimes I would add some Greek yogurt, or I'd even put some whey protein in as well to give it a bit of flavor. But at the moment, I'm able to hit my protein goals, but I'm not hitting my other carbs and fat goals. So it's almost like I've added in this extra meal just to hit those numbers. I find that if I have protein every single time I eat, I end up eating a lot more protein than what I need and lacking in my fats and carbs. And coming out of a diet and a competition prep, it's really important for me to get my fats and my carbs back to a healthier place. So
you
that's
actually
kind of what I do.
You almost experienced the opposite issue to some people, in that you were over consuming protein.
Yeah.
How much protein do you try and consume daily? I guess maybe it fluctuates depending on what phase of your training you're in.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, I need to hit a minimum of 115 grams, but usually I hit 125, and that's more than sufficient for someone of my height and size. So it really is the carbs and fats I need to actually bump up a little bit.
Oh, okay. I think this is good to hear this from you, because I think we're going to talk about your life as a competitor in a sec, but I think there's a sort of culturally misunderstood idea that in order to be athletic or fit or have some sort of muscle mass, you need to sort of guzzle down protein shakes or eat whole chickens. And I won't lie, I fell for this. This is when I was younger.
Yeah.
I sometimes joke, you know, when I was at the Guildhall, this is in my sort of early to mid 20s, for my lunch, I would pop across the road to the Waitrose and buy a whole chicken and eat the whole chicken as my lunch.
Way.
Yeah. I mean, so ridiculous, but I thought, I'm going to be a big, strong, you know, eating, you know, probably my daily requirement of protein in one meal. And then I'd still have like breakfast and dinner and snacks and maybe even a protein shake after the gym. And did you ever sort of fall prey to this kind of thinking, or have you always been sort of on point?
No, I think it would be a big lie for me to sit here and say, oh no, I've never done that. You know, when you start, especially when you start lifting weights, and you know, you speak to other personal trainers and you read up articles online, it is protein, protein, protein. They're the building blocks for muscles. It's the best way to lose weight. So yeah, I mean, I remember my Nando's order before. I used to order half a chicken to myself.
Wow.
And like,
and other things as well, or just the chicken?
No, I'd have like I like the spicy rice. I would order that spicy rice, half a chicken, and then a side salad. Very, very bodybuilder bro.
Yeah. That's a proper bro meal right there.
It is, yeah.
This
The
is
bro Nando's order.
these, this is good to hear from you, because obviously you're someone who has had to be very meticulous with your diet. And I think this myth of you need, 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight or whatever is just not just sort of unhelpful, because it's just completely unnecessary, but certainly really high consumption of protein, particularly over a long period of time, years, can take its toll on the body,
Yes.
particularly, the kidneys and so forth. And also it's just, it's expensive. It's expensive both
Yeah.
on a personal level, buying eggs and chicken and steak, whatever, is, costs a lot of money. And also when a lot of us do it, it does take its toll on the planet. Consuming all of this meat is it's costly. It's costly in all respects.
Yes.
Is this something you consider when you're thinking about these things, or?
Yeah, I mean, I've actually got a funny story, which is, it's not, it wasn't funny at the time. So the first time I decided to do a competition, I was working with this female trainer, and she gave me a meal plan. Bear in mind, I was in my third year at Guildhall, so I was still at uni, still a student.
Okay.
And the food she gave me, you would look at it and go, oh, that's a healthy diet. But when I calculated the protein, the fats and the carbs, it was all out of balance. So for my first meal would be oats, blueberries with a scoop of whey protein. So that was fine. My second meal would be 2 eggs plus 50 grams of egg whites and some avocado.
Okay.
So I would eat that when I got to Guildhall.
Wow.
My third meal.
You take a Tupperware to the Guildhall.
Yes, I had one of those Tupperware bags.
Wow. Okay. Dedication. I love it.
Yeah. So then my third meal was chicken and veg.
Okay.
My fourth meal was cod or any other white fish with veg and a little bit of rice. I would then have my post-workout, which was a protein shake and a banana. I would then have my evening meal, which was beef and veg. And then my last meal would be salmon with veg. Now, the protein was over 200 grams for a 21-year-old who weighed about maybe 57 kg at the time.
Wow.
My fat was about 20 grams, 25 grams, far too low.
Yeah, way too.
And my carbs were 70 to 80.
Gosh,
and
exhausting.
that, it was awful. It messed up my digestion, and it did have an effect on my menstrual cycle. And it's why now I'm so keen to get the information out there and make sure no one makes the same mistake that I did.
Well, and unfortunately, and let's not dwell on it, but it wasn't your fault. I mean, you'd sought out professional advice and got professional advice that wasn't helpful to you. It may have helped you reach a sort of superficial goal, but obviously it wasn't really taking into account your overall health and well-being, which is, suboptimal. So I wanted to ask you about your life as a bikini competitor. And if I have your permission, I'll superimpose a couple of your recent photographs, because it's really incredible what you achieve. I mean, you look absolutely amazing. And actually, as I mentioned to you before, when I told my colleagues at the Voice Care Center that I was going to be speaking to you, they were really excited. I showed them photos. I'm like, this is a colleague of mine. They were really excited about hearing what you had to say. But can you explain to people who might not be familiar with that world what it means to be a bikini competitor? You've already given us a bit of an insight, the incredible diet one needs to follow, but can you sort of just give a brief outline of what it is?
Yes. So Bikini competing and being a bikini competitor it's a form of bodybuilding. So that's the best way I can describe it. The bikini category it's kind of like the entry level one. So it's the most realistic, the most achievable, and the look and criteria that they go for is the healthy, I just woke up like this kind of look.
Okay.
If only we could wake up looking like that every day. So yeah, there needs to be evidence of muscles, but it's not as hard, and you don't need to get as lean as the figure girls or some of the women's bodybuilding. So it's a softer look, a more realistic, more achievable, and they're going for the beach bikini look.
And so, am I right to think that, there's these, I guess, three categories, and the bikini is sort of, to put it in simplest terms, you're sort of the least muscular or smallest, all the way up to women's bodybuilding, which is the sort of most muscular, and they, that going into the category, you sort of, are there like weight limitations for your height or things like that, or?
It's all done by height for bikini, because some girls, you can have one girl who is 57 kg and she could have a lot more muscle and be very lean, and you can have another girl of the same height who might be 53 kg or something. So it varies on weight, and yeah, you're right, it's the bikini category. There is still muscle needed. Like, you still obviously have to train very hard, but in comparison to women's bodybuilding or even women's physique, it's a lot less.
It's I obviously am quite heavily involved in fitness and gym culture, but I don't have any association with the world of bodybuilding. But so to my sort of untrained eye, when I look at photographs of the bikini competitors, it kind of looks to me like a physique that you would see at a gym of a very fit woman who maybe, who does lift weights, but it doesn't strike as a sort of a hugely muscularly developed physique. Is that a sort of accurate description of?
Yeah, that's spot on. They are looking for that healthy look, that healthy fit physique of someone. And it's interesting when you actually see these bikini girls in person on show day, because they do look so small, and we're not walking around with these muscles like popping out all the time. It is very much the presentation on stage, and some people do look at those photos and go, oh gosh, they look quite big, they look quite muscular, but it's all an illusion in a way. We pose a certain way to make our muscles look bigger, but even when you see a bikini competitor or even a women's physique competitor just walking around normally, you would never guess that they're of that.
Yes, like if you see a male bodybuilder, it's like they can't hide it. I mean, I don't know if you saw, there was a recent I think video on Instagram of The Rock. I think he was endorsing a political candidate or something like that. But what actually was most prominent was he was wearing this t-shirt, and he had so many muscles. He almost looked like a sort of bunch of walnuts wrapped up in a balloon or something. It was incredible. But it's like, when people get that big, you literally can't hide it. Like back in the day, you saw Arnold Schwarzenegger wearing a suit. Not even a suit could cover that amount of muscles. Whereas with someone like yourself, there's an obvious, you talk about this illusion, there's quite an obvious distinction between how you look just in everyday life and how you present yourself on stage as a bikini competitor. Is that sort of accurate?
Yeah, definitely. It's like when I say to people, oh, I'm a bikini competitor, it's bodybuilding. They look at me and they're like, you're a bodybuilder? And then I have to explain that, I'm not a jacked woman. It's a softer category.
really obvious observation, I think, from the photographs is kind of how lean you are, like how lean the physique is. I'm really curious as to, I guess you've given us a slight idea, but can you talk me through the process of how you get to that sort of level of leanness? I mean, it must take an incredible amount of dedication.
Yes, yes. So the first thing to note is that it's an extreme sport. So you don't accidentally get this lean, and it does require a lot of dedication, and you have to be 100% in it. So you need to have your body needs to be physically able to do it. So what I mean by that is you can't be someone who diets all year round. You have to have time in an off season where your calories are at surplus or at maintenance. You need to make sure your training is on point. You know, you're performing well in the gym, you're progressing in lifts. So physically, you need to be ready in that sense. Mentally, you need to also be willing to sacrifice a lot, and mentally push through those really, really tough times. You know, those days where you're exhausted, you need to keep going. So you do need to be 100% in it.
I bet. And is that related more to the diet aspect or the training aspect, or both?
Yeah, both. I mean, it's different for everyone. What I find is when your energy levels are so low, but you're not actually hungry, but you feel like you need to eat because your energy's low. So if you're tired, you know, one of the things you feel like you should do is, you know, go have some food to give you that energy. But when you're on restricted calories, you can't do that. So you're kind of in this slump of feeling really, really tired, knowing you have to go to the gym, but you can only eat a certain amount. So that's the mental battle that I find.
I bet. I bet. I mean, it must take not just willpower, but I mean, presumably are there mental tricks you can play, or is it just a case of drinking enough coffee to get through that afternoon, or maybe a combination of both? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, well, what kind of tips do I do? I always I time my meals, and for me, this just helps me to get through the day knowing that I am going to get food. So, you know, I prep a certain number of meals, and I usually eat them at the same time if I can. So that gives me that structure to stick to. And even if I am hungry, I know that at 5 o'clock I'm going to have a little snack before I have my dinner a couple of hours later.
Okay. And does that? It sounds like that is a mental game. Like, okay, I'm a bit hungry. I can eat at 4 p.m. or whatever. Okay, I know at 7 I get a bowl of oats or whatever. Is that so? You're being so restricted that you need to sort of, well, I guess, treat yourself with the meals, or
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And you know, there are other diet hacks you can do in between the days. So on something like diet fizzy drinks is it's not the healthiest thing in the world, but a diet Coke can kind of satisfy that almost hunger you have. You know, as I said, it's not the healthiest option, but in a situation where your calories are so restricted and you're getting to this extreme result in this extreme sport, there are little ways around it.
I mean, look, I think you've alluded to it a couple of times now, but I think the world of bodybuilding, even at the sort of slightly less extreme end, I think people can generalize and criticize it for being unhealthy. But it sounds to me from what you're saying that these measures you take are only temporary. This is to sort of peak for a competition. So it's a short-term experience. And also, you know, it sounds like from what you're eating, even that extreme diet that you articulated earlier that you recognize wasn't optimal, it's still healthier than your average Western diet by a lot. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, you know, I get it, and you're obviously cognizant of it. I get that people recognize that any sort of extreme sport can come with potential, can be potentially not necessarily dangerous, but not necessarily the most healthy thing you can do. And I think that's probably, you could say that about any athlete. You know, once you push your body past a certain level, it starts to become about winning and the sport, and not about optimal health, which is fine. We accept that. But I do find some of the criticisms of the bodybuilding world to be and maybe a little bit solipsistic, because actually, for the bodybuilders I know, or the people that follow that sort of regime, for the most part, the diet is actually extremely healthy. It's a sort of balance of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. It always contains a certain amount of vegetables. Like we joked before, the standard bro meal of chicken, rice, and broccoli. That's a pretty healthy meal. You know, if everyone ate chicken, rice, and broccoli, they'd probably be better off. Do you have any thoughts on that? Does it annoy you, some of those criticisms, or do you just whatever? Maybe people are just ignorant, or?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of kind of new opinions on what a bodybuilder's diet should look like. And, you know, if we take it back to Arnie's day, I have no doubt he was on the chicken, beef, salmon, eggs, protein shakes. It was very restricted. But now with, you know, flexible dieting and macros, there is a healthier, varied diet available. And I think a lot more people realize that to get lean and to get stage ready, you know, that isn't achieved by eating chicken, broccoli, and rice. That's achieved by being in a calorie deficit. So, you know, there's a lot of girls who do macro tracking for shows, and that's something that I do as well. So, you know, when I'm dieting, I'm still eating dark chocolate, I'm still having milk in my coffee, I'm able to eat as much fruit as I want, which once upon a time was something that bodybuilders didn't do. You know, there was this whole thing that fruit has sugar and you shouldn't eat it.
Fructose, yeah. Okay, so
Yes.
like you've really found an approach that, although it has to be extreme to get you that extreme result, it sounds like it's actually quite sustainable and it works nicely for you. Ask how you got into it, because I was thinking about you, and I thought you must have a bit of an attraction to quite niche pursuits, you know, being at the Guildhall, you know, wanting to be a stage manager for theatre or opera or musicals or whatever, and then also being a bodybuilder. These are both really niche worlds. Is this how did this happen?
How did this happen? So when I first started going to the gym, I was introduced to kind of powerlifting training. So I did squat, deadlift, and press. Okay. And I continued that throughout my time at Guildhall. I hired a personal trainer when I was at Guildhall just to kind of get me on track. And he introduced me to more hypertrophy training. So hypertrophy is slightly higher reps, but lower weights. Yeah. So that can really help with your big lifts that you do.
Hi, Claudia. Because this is something that I think you've touched on something that I think is really useful for people. I think people often think, oh, if you want to be really, really big, you need to lift really, really big, the heaviest weight possible. But actually, as you have just articulated, actually, if you do powerlifting, where you lift the heaviest weight possible for very few reps, maybe 1, 2, 3 repetitions, this actually encourages a neurological adaptation. So you can actually get a lot stronger without getting much bigger. Whereas if you train in that hypertrophic range, like you're talking about, slightly lighter weights, but more, what do you work on? That's my dog. You work, I guess, what, in that 8 to 15 rep range? Is that where you tend to live, or what do you like to do?
Yeah, I mean, my program's a little bit varied. So I've got some exercises that are in the, I work up to a heavy set of 6. So I have some of that, but then a lot of it is between that 8 to 12 and 15 rep range. Yeah.
And do you do a body split, or do you train full body? Like, do you do like arms one day, legs one day, chest one day?
Yeah, so I do a split at the moment. So it's something like back and arms, and then I'll do quads and calves, or glutes and hamstrings. There's no benefit to doing it that way. It's just what I enjoy doing. So I enjoy training at the gym 5 times a week. So in order for me to make progress, but also not overtrain, I do it split.
Of course, because if you were to train full body 5 times a week, you would sort of overtrain your ability to recover.
Yeah, yeah, and it would probably hinder my progress as opposed to, progress it.
That's great, and that leads us quite beautifully into the crux of today, which is this effect of exercise on performers, or particularly on professional voice users. And thank you. I remember when I put something out on my Instagram, and Claudia got back to me saying that this was something she was really interested in when she was at the Guildhall. So can you elaborate? Did you say you wrote your dissertation in this sort of area?
Yeah, so my another funny story. My initial dissertation idea was to do it based on, is it healthy for opera singers to lift weights, and does that have an effect on their voice? So I started the research on that, but I just found that there wasn't a lot of literature and reading on it. So my supervisor said, look, it's going to be really difficult for you to do this and to write a convincing dissertation, so think of something else. So I did, but it didn't stop me from reading up about it and trying to learn more. And there isn't a lot of reading or literature on it. There's no studies that show whether it's good or bad, so it's something that is still something that you need to kind of figure out yourself. And that's kind of what I've been doing, looking at, okay, how does the singer's voice work? Okay, what does exercising do to this muscle group? So it's kind of piecing it together.
I found the same. And I'm so glad to have this chat with you about it. As much as, I love singing and obviously the opera world, and as much as the bubble that I put myself in, the singer bubble, makes me think that it's really, really popular and important. Of course, as we were just saying, it's a tiny niche industry. And if you if you were in a physiotherapy lab or whatever, human research exercise lab, and asked for funding for a proposal on the effect of exercise on opera singers, you wouldn't get the funding, because unfortunately there's just not enough interest in this. Now, what I'm hoping, and what this conversation is a part of, is that we could sort of do this work to at least some extent, or at least get the ball really rolling at the Voice Care Center, because we have this whole team of people who are interested in it, and we have a physiotherapist, we have osteopath, we have speech therapists, we have people who do massage, we work with an ENT. So there's really a team in place that can sort of do some real work. But in your research, did you come to any conclusions about, I guess, specifically any potential benefit or detriment to be experienced when voice actors or singers exercise or particularly lift weights?
Yeah, so I found that there was a lot of benefits to it as opposed to detriments. So firstly, exercise, whether it's cardio or if it's lifting weights, it builds your stamina. And I know from being in rehearsals and working on shows, you opera singers have a lot to deal with. So if you compare an opera in today's world with what it was like in the 17th century, you guys are doing so much more moving around. Before, the singers would just kind of stand there and sing out, but now you might be dancing, you might be running from one side of the stage to the other, you might be climbing up things, you might be moving scenery. While you're doing this, you're also trying to hit the notes and make sure you know make sure you sing.
The theatrical demands are definitely higher than the expectations are different. I had very eye-opening experience the first time I sang the role Don Giovanni, and the show opens with a very physically active scene. You're having a fight with this character Donna Anna, and then her father comes along, and you basically have you have a fight to the death in some form. Now I've done it where there's been guns. I've done it when there's been swords. I've done it where I've beaten a guy's head with a rock. It's, you know, but it's physical regardless of what you do. And then there's this real sort of pianissimo trio of the death of this father, and the three men are singing together, and it's slow and sustained and quiet. And if you go too hard on the sword fight or whatever, and don't breathe and are out of shape, it's impossible to get that trio. And I think I often recommend to singers a sort of form of high intensity interval training for that purpose, because what I understand is, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is that the high intensity interval training helps to be able to bring your respiratory rate and heart rate back down quickly after a burst of intensive exercise. So if you then map that onto singing or into that scene I just described, sure, your heart rate and respiratory rate will be elevated slightly from, or maybe even somewhat from the fight. But if you have that cardiovascular fitness trained through HIIT training, it's likely they will be able to come down much more quickly. Does that sort of ring true with your experience?
Yes, yeah, you're spot on with that. Yeah, so that high intensity can help really. It helps you almost manage your stamina, or be able to control it in a better way than if you didn't do it. So yeah, for scenes like that, I think it's really important that singers have, you know, some form of training that improves their capability of doing so.
There's also some very recent research, which you may have come across, but if not, I'd love to send it to you to see what you think. But my colleague, Dr. Geneva Williams, works with singers, and she sent it to me. And it was research regarding, I'll add a link to it because I might fudge it a bit, but it was research regarding vocal recovery time. You know, because obviously when you sing an opera or speak all day or whatever, it's taxing on your vocal mechanism. And the research found that individuals who are cardiovascularly trained had increased, not increased in terms of time, but more effective vocal recovery time. So they actually recovered more quickly from intensive use of the voice. Because of increased blood flow, better metabolic profile, and so forth. Have you come across anything like that?
I haven't read that one specifically, but when I've been looking at how a voice works and how our breathing works, it is all controlled by muscles. So, you know, in the logical sense, if you're able to train a muscle, it gets stronger. You're able to control it better. And therefore, when you use it in everyday life or functionally, then it improves, you know, its use. So, you know, just like any other muscle, not just what you're singing with and how you speak, but all the muscles around it, they've got a role to play in it.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's awareness of the musculature, I think, or training of the musculature develops a sort of proprioception that can be useful in physical activities, any physical activity. If you know what it feels like to flex your left pec or something, that means you can seek to avoid that sensation because of enhanced musculature awareness, enhanced proprioception.
Yeah.
Just so we're not, seeming, I guess, too biased, because obviously you know, we both love the gym. And I think, you know, when I read research that suggests that exercise is good for the voice, it's obviously pleasing to me. And that can be a dangerous route to go down because, you know, oh, great, done and dusted, it's fine, exercise is great for the voice. You know, you've got to be almost doubly skeptical if the information you're reading is pleasing to you. Have you found any potential detriment to exercising the voice or lifting weights? Or I guess more specifically, are there any exercises or exercise modalities that you would recommend singers avoid for any particular reason?
Yeah, I mean, any detriment to anyone partaking in exercise is if you have a trainer who isn't very good or you haven't got a lot of correct information on it. So, you know, if you have a trainer who just throws exercises at you and doesn't take into account you as a person, you're going to encounter some kind of injury. And if you're a singer, it could damage your, you know, your instrument.
Yeah.
There was a lot of talk about grunting in the gym. So, you know, I'm sure if you've been in the gym and you've been to the man cave, as it's sometimes called, you hear,
where the big dumbbells are. Yeah,
exactly. You know, you hear those guys grunting. So you know, I don't know enough about if that affects the voice, but I can imagine if you're grunting and placing force on your vocal cords, it could do some damage to it. I'm not sure if it would do damage in the long run, but certainly in the short term.
Acutely, you could walk out of the gym hoarse if you were sort of screaming and grunting.
Yeah.
But Claudia, you know, where I train, I have gone to a few hardcore gyms in my time, but I got to be honest, I'm too old and I'm not strong enough to hold my own in those anymore. But you know, where I train, it's sort of bad gym etiquette to huff and puff and grunt and heave. Do you? I'm sorry to ask this, but like, do you grunt when you lift? Obviously, you train really hard to get the results you do. Are you grunting when you're lifting weights?
I have to be honest, I'm not actually sure if I do.
Something to be wary of. Like
Yeah.
squat.
I mean, I know that I'm, you know, I make some kind of noise when I'm reaching failure.
Okay.
I don't grunt as much as some of the guys who really go for it. But you know, there's a bit of struggle in some things, so there's a bit of, you know, a little bit of grunting.
I do think, fine, I take your point about reaching failure and there being a sort of extra push you can get from a sort of respiratory expulsion. But I encourage one tip, because I do think there are some potential detriments to exercise and lifting weights in the voice. Not generally, but specifically. And one of them you've brought up beautifully, this idea of heaving, grunting, engaging that grunting reflex of the chords, and the association between effort, physical effort, and that mechanism of closing the chords. Because if you go to pick up a table and go, huh, what that does is close your chords, close your throat. This is the opposite of singing. And I do notice that if there can be almost a psychological association between effort and that mechanism. And so then when you come to singing a high note, which does take physical effort, you might subconsciously engage this throat closing reflex because you're thinking of effort, and that's a definite no-no. I think that's a real mistake. And what I encourage singers to do is actually, when you do, if you are getting to that more fatiguing part of the set, to think almost the opposite. I'm going to open my throat and breathe out, almost more like a sort of yoga or Pilates style breath. And that will then start to have the opposite effect. You start to associate effort with an opening and a relaxing of the throat, which I find has been helpful. Now, the big caveat to that, and this is where the sort of maybe incompatibility argument might come in, is I wonder, and I'm not sure, if someone were to reach your level, that, you know, the level of intensity of training that you need, maybe these things become incompatible. Do you know what I mean? Like the intensity of training that you need to reach your goal as a fitness a bikini competitor, you might need to, excuse me, but grunt a little bit. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, it's a good point. And yeah, I suppose if, you know, if I were to train someone who was an opera singer, I definitely wouldn't give them the same kind of program or even intensity that I'm on, because we've both got very different goals. So just because someone's grunting in a gym because they're lifting heavy, it doesn't mean you as a singer needs to do the same to achieve your goals. It's very individualized. That's kind of where I sit with that one.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I just wonder if you know, I think exercise and even lifting weights and good singing are compatible, and then, you know, they're fully compatible until a point of extremity. And then if you really want to optimize your singing or optimize your bodybuilding, they start to diverge a little bit. And actually, what the advice because I do get a lot of singers now come to me who are trained heavily in CrossFit or lifting weights or even powerlifting or a few martial artists. I often say, well, look, when you get to that point, a decision must be made. Are you a CrossFit athlete, or are you willing to sacrifice a little bit? You can still be really fit, really strong, really healthy, but are you willing to sacrifice 10 seconds of your WOD time to sing a role at the Metropolitan Opera? And that's certainly the concession I had to make, because, you know, I would love to train more and harder than I currently do, but I find at a point it just hits a point where the training intensity is so high that it starts to detract a bit from the intensity I can give to the singing. And these are neurologically demanding.
Yeah, and I mean that there's quite a lot of reading that I did where it was done by a lot of singing teachers, so I kind of took it with a pinch of salt, but they were saying that if muscles get too big, then it can have an impact on how a singer does perform. So, you know, if you want to just be fit and go to the gym and still do your singing, then you can do that. But as you said, once you reach that place where you almost have to make a decision on what direction you want to go in, I think it's valid, because you know, when you're breathing, you've got muscles that help you breathe in, and then you've got muscles that help you breathe out. And obviously when you're singing, you need to have control of the breath. If the muscles that are used to breathe out are too big, there might be an impact. You know, I'm not sure what would actually happen. There's no reading about it, but I can imagine it would have an impact on it.
That's a really good point. I think you might be referring to some of the work of a fantastic teacher at the Guildhall called Janice Chapman, an Australian teacher. I don't know if you ever came across any. I mean, I actually learned with her for a while. She's a brilliant teacher, and she talks about also something that I really agree with, and something I've seen, because at the Voice Care Centre we work with a lot of West End performers and standard, you know, spoken theatre actors, and there is a pressure for a lot of young men, particularly in the musical theatre world, to look a certain way, to be like that really muscular, that lean sort of physique, because it, you know, it appeals to a certain crowd. And that's fine, but it's hard to sustain that look for 3, 4, 5 years, you know, it's particularly, you know, when you start to get past 30, and we have a lot of younger men come to us who have, there's a certain look where it's all about the development of the abs, pecs, shoulders, and biceps. And, you know, because then you get that sort of beach look, you know, the beach muscles. And what I found in several clients now is this exacerbation of a thoracic kyphosis. That sort of, you know, those guys you see at the gym who want to look super huge and they sort of walk around a bit like this. They sort of, I think they call it invisible lat syndrome, where you,
That's the one, yeah.
yeah, and over time, the training of those muscles, the chest, they're all muscles that relate to thoracic kyphosis, a sort of rounding of the shoulders, that sort of gorilla look. And I think this often happens from an imbalance in training. If you train all the pushing muscles, but forget or don't train as much the pulling muscles, because, you know, you can't see your back. So I think a lot of people tend to neglect it. And doing things like pull-ups and deadlifts and rows is also quite draining, quite tiring. Much easier to sit on a chest press machine and just press out a few reps, you know? Do you, I mean, clearly from the way you look, you have good balance in your training. Is this something that you focus on?
Oh, sorry, I missed the last bit.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying, clearly from your physique, from the way you look, you obviously have very good balance in your training. Is this a particular focus for you?
Yeah, I mean, for bikini, the physique is, there's certain things that they look for. So it's about glutes, hamstrings, and shoulders. So a lot of the time, competitors can get into a routine where it isn't balanced, but my coach and I, we keep it balanced. Just because you're training a muscle, just because I'm doing a chest press, it doesn't mean my chest is going to get huge. You know, if you're training one side of your body, you need to train the other side to keep that balance, as you said.
And I think this is good advice for singers. If you know, make sure you train your legs. You know, make sure you train your back. It's not just about the shoulders and the pecs and the abs, because actually these are the muscles that, in my experience and from what I've read, the ones that may potentially get in the way of correct vocal and breathing technique.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think, as you said, especially the chest and the abs, it's one that's very, you know, you'll have opinions on it. So singing teachers will say, don't train your abs, don't train your core, don't do any press and movement. But I think as long as it's done correctly and with the correct intensity, then you shouldn't have a problem.
This is perfect. This is, I think you've managed to, I've been trying to summarize this for months, and you've just done it better than I have. Correct form and correct intensity. That's it. I don't necessarily disagree with the core training aspect that a lot of singing teachers warn about. I think people who just do tons of crunches, I just don't think this is good anyway, because you get that pattern overload and then, you know, a rigidity in the rectus abdominis, which is not good anyway, but particularly not good for singing. I always recommend singers train their core musculature either through functional movement or through anti-rotational exercises, things like Pallof presses or planks and things like that, because it doesn't tend to lead to a massive development of the core musculature, just a strengthening of it, which is a fantastic article you wrote about, and I'll provide a link to it, but about energy levels and how they fluctuate and change according to the menstrual cycle. And I think this is great because it does cross over with some of the nutritional advice I often give to female clients. Obviously things like iron levels and intake of healthy fats and calorie needs. can be optimized in accordance with the menstrual cycle, as you know, and I think you wrote about. But you also suggest a few very specific lifestyle and training changes, and you get quite specific into the hormonal changes that occur during the different stages of the cycle. And what I'd love to do is outline each of these, and then maybe talk about how these concepts that you articulate can possibly be mapped onto performers. Because I often find myself needing to emphasize to performers how physically demanding their jobs can be. And it's almost like doing a workout. And I think some of the training principles that you articulate could be really valuable to singers and other performers. So is that okay? Can we kind of go through it?
Absolutely.
So let's talk about the first phase, days 1 to 7, which is the bleeding, not to put it too crudely, sorry, phase. So can you sort of articulate? You talk about things like your energy levels being high. Can you sort of articulate some of that?
Yeah. So day 1, which is the bleed, that's when I'll say first, it's different for every woman, but we're just looking at how the hormones change and how it could have an impact on it. So day 1, the bleed, your hormones are low, so that they're at the lowest they'll ever be in the cycle, and this can cause you to feel a little bit fatigued. And then once you get from day 2 to kind of day 7, your estrogen starts to rise along with your serotonin. So this makes us feel good. So estrogen is first of all, it's an appetite suppressor. So we don't have those hunger or those cravings, and our energy is higher. So in terms of training, it's a really good time to do strength training and make some new strength gains, as they say. And then we continue for another 7 days, so up to the day of ovulation. That's when women, we're living our best lives. So that's when we feel great and our energy levels are skyrocket, and we're able to get lots of things done.
Claudia, before we get back to this wonderful day, day 8 to 14, pre-ovulation and ovulation, can we take one step back to sort of the first week, the bleeding phase? Because I just want to get quite specific. You talk particularly about glucose metabolism being elevated at this point, which is something I won't lie, I was completely ignorant to. So would you suggest that this is a period of time where carbohydrate or even sugar intake could likely be a little bit higher?
Yeah, absolutely. So at this time, your body is using carbs as its initial fuel source. So women, in comparison to men, where we use our fat for fuel more. So, I don't want to go too off topic on it, but a lot of women think going low carb, high fat is better for them. And in some cases it is, but I think it comes from that fact that women use fat more. But in this days 1 to 7, your body is utilizing carbohydrates more. So that is the time where you can increase your carbs, and you'll feel the benefit of it, because your body is going, okay, there's carbs here, I'm going to take that and use it for energy. So yes, it's a great time to be eating lots of carbs.
I wanted to highlight it as potentially welcome news.
Yes,
and also it almost need not be said, but since we're here, this is obviously where iron levels are likely to be deficient for obvious reasons, the loss of blood. So this may be a time when increasing either dietary iron intake or perhaps even taking an iron supplement would likely yield some benefit. Is this something you normally recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. So making sure you get, meat in. It's a great time to have steak, some spinach, or yeah, and any other kinds of foods that are high in iron, mostly found in meat, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, steak, come on, yeah, spinach. As a performer, female performer, a menstruating performer, um, it, you know, a steak dinner with a big serving of rice, perhaps, or even, steak dinner maybe with a nice dessert after might actually be a welcome meal, because you'll replenish lost iron levels. And then, of course, your ability to metabolize carbohydrates and glucose is elevated. So you're not likely to experience the negative effects of a higher carbohydrate intake.
Yeah, you're going to be bouncing with energy after that meal.
Brilliant. Hey, this is great stuff. Okay, so I'm sorry to stop you. So let's move on to then this magical, living your best life phase, which I think you outlined as being days 8 to 14, the pre-ovulation and ovulation stage. So can we talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so this is when your estrogen is still high, your serotonin is still high. So the serotonin is a feel-good hormone. So that's, you still haven't got that hunger or those cravings, because your estrogen is high as well, that's suppressing your appetite. Your ability to use glucose and carbohydrate is still there, so it's a great time to continue eating a higher carb diet. And your energy levels in itself are pretty high, a lot higher than they were during your bleed. So you'll often find that women don't sleep for as long as they usually do, so they can get by on maybe 6 or 7 hours sleep. Right. There is a downside to this, and the only downside is you can be a bit distracted from things. So because you do have all this energy, it's almost like you can't focus, and you can get a bit distracted or sidetracked by other things. But
okay. So in terms of training or performance rehearsing, or this would be the time to really go gangbusters. No, this would be the time, if you're in a rehearsal period, this would be the time to also maybe come back in the evening and start working on your, the next opera you're singing, or go to that spin class in the evening, or go to yoga class in the evening, or train in the evening. This is sort of the period where you can expect to make a lot of progress and not overdo it, and not sort of fatigue yourself. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So your recovery is a lot higher as well. So that's why if you're in the gym, you're able to lift more, because you're able to recover quicker. So exactly the same as if you're doing rehearsals, you can work super, super hard, and you won't necessarily feel as exhausted as you would at another time of the month. So yeah, it's a great time to get things done.
That's brilliant. I really hope that this is, I do give nutritional advice that sort of maps onto the cycle, because it's something we study. You have to be cognizant of these things. But I hope that my this being so eye-opening to me isn't just because I'm completely ignorant as a man. This really seems like valuable. I guess what I'm saying is, I have to be careful talking about this stuff, because it's not something I've experienced, obviously. So, which is why I'm asking you. But I hope this isn't stuff that every woman sort of intuitively knows, and I'm just sort of throwing myself into the arena completely ignorantly and blindly.
No, I mean, the only way I kind of figured out all these things was partially reading, but also my own experience. So I got an app, and I tracked my cycle, and it asks you to fill out all your symptoms. So, if you're hungry, you can put that in. If you're feeling tired, you can put that in. But then also, if you're feeling really energetic, really happy, and you're able to go to the gym and do really, really good workouts, then once you track that into this app, it can predict your cycle. And when you look back over say the last 3 months, you can identify, okay, so after I had my bleed, this happened and I felt great. But then after I had my ovulation, this happened. So for any females out there, I would really recommend downloading an app that tracks your cycle, and you become more in tune with your body. And I know all these articles you see online about the cycle, you can resonate with it, and you can figure out yourself when is the best time to do certain things, and also when is time to take a step back and, you know, slow down because your body is doing its own thing inside.
That's brilliant advice. So you're saying that you were able to sort of map when you felt good and when you felt less energy and so forth, and the app was able to predict your cycle based on that, and it was accurate.
Yeah, I mean, give or take like a day or two, or maybe 3 at max, but it was very clever with it. Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, that's quite telling, right? I mean, that's the fact that it's so accurate that it can be used to predict is a really telling factor. Okay,
Yeah.
so we've done the first two, which is all basically mainly good news. We hit into the luteal phase post ovulation, which is kind of days 15 to 28 ish.
Yeah.
And you talk about the things, a dip in energy being caused by a dip in estrogen and a rise in progesterone. Is that right?
Yes. Yes. So progesterone, it's the calming hormone. So that makes you feel calm, and it's a little bit of a sedator. So it can make you slow down. So while that's rising, your estrogen is decreasing. And as you said before, estrogen is an appetite suppressor. So once that lowers, that's when you get the increase in appetite, an increase in cravings for foods. Also, the progesterone, it raises your basal metabolic rate. So that's your temperature. So if you notice after ovulation that your body temperature is higher and you feel hotter, you might have night sweats. That's because that's your progesterone. So while this is happening, your body requires more calories. And I read somewhere that it increases by like 9 to 12%. So for some women, you can get an extra 200 or 300 calories to eat, and it won't have an effect on your weight because your body needs that extra energy.
So this increased heat production. So that's, you know, we're always looking for good news. This might be potentially welcome news in this phase when you are perhaps not feeling as good as you did in the previous week, the pre-ovulation and ovulation period. You know, you can sort of compensate slightly for this with you know, even up to 12%. So let's just, you know, 10% bump in calorie intake without any potential negative unwanted weight gain. That's great news.
Yeah, it's amazing. So you know, your body kind of craving certain foods and saying it's hungrier. It's not a lack of discipline or a lack of willpower. It's actually your body going, no, I'm hungry because I need these foods.
I need this. And you talk about, I think that's a really strong message, actually. You know, one issue I keep coming up against is this sort of very unfortunate cultural association of weight and guilt. And, you know, people who, I don't know if they fall off their diet, or, you know, they often come to me with, you know, almost with an underpinning sense of shame, guilt, you know, because of their weight. And it often takes quite a while to dispel that notion. I think it's something very unhelpful that we started to associate body weight and personality. You know, this idea of being overweight, for example, being associated with laziness or greediness, gluttony. It's just not true. It's just not what practically happens in the real world.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, especially in this phase after the ovulation, you know, your body is going through a lot of things. You know, it's kind of waiting, you know, for a fertilized egg. And you know, the symptoms you experience of fatigue, obviously your cravings, your appetites increase, you've got mood swings, you've even got a bit of apathy. You know, your body is going through a lot, and those things aren't, they're not in your head. It's actually your body going, no, this is how I'm feeling, and my priority right now is to make a home for a fertilized egg. So yeah, I think you're completely right, and that the shame with, you know, weight and, you know, should I eat if I'm hungry? I think it's when you put it into perspective of what your body's doing, it sounds a bit crazy. You know, you're fighting against Mother Nature and what naturally has to happen.
Yeah, so that sentiment, a shame, guilt, whatever you want to call it, can only exist in an absence of knowledge of what you're saying. As soon as you articulate these facts, that makes no sense anymore. Those negative associations. And how, mapping this now onto training or onto an active performer, how would your behavior or your training reflect this period? You also mentioned potentially a state of lower ability to recover.
Yeah, so it varies for women. So I know some women who can get through this period fine and continue training. Some others not so much. So it's a good time to kind of take a step back from the heavier weights that you were maybe doing before and focus a bit more on higher reps. So lower reps, so more kind of endurance training. If you enjoy doing cardio, you know, going for runs and stuff, you can do it at a slower pace or a shorter distance. In terms of performance, you will feel that you are more tired. So it's not saying you can't perform, but just optimize your rest. So make sure you are getting, you know, enough sleep. If you need an extra 2 hours, then take it, because your body will thank you for it.
So the sense I'm getting from you is that it's a period where you can sort of I don't know, forgive yourself for being a bit more tired, and almost honor that change in hormonal profile with a more sort of a generally more restful approach to your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And
no, go ahead, please.
I was just going to touch on the nutrition side of it as well. So at this point, unfortunately, carbohydrates aren't going to be your best friend. You are going to experience that spike and that crash a bit more than you did in the first 2 weeks. So this is a good time to bring in your fats. So, you know, make sure you bump up your avocado, your nuts, nut butters, even your dark chocolate. So really bringing in a higher fat, slightly lower carb diet, not too low, because your body still needs that glucose, but just optimizing your fats a bit more.
So that steak and rice or steak and dessert meal that we recommended for the first phase, maybe not such a good idea in this. A more like an avocado chicken salad or something might be a more kind of, yes. So even though you might be having these cravings due to the increased energy expenditure because of the heat production, satisfying those cravings with like sugary foods is probably not the best idea.
No, because you are going to experience that crash, and then you get into this cycle of you've crashed and you think you need to, you know, eat more of that sugary stuff. So yeah, I mean, I would say a good meal to have at this time is maybe some fish, so some salmon, so you get your, you know, your healthy fats and your omegas from there. Lots of green veg. You are more likely to hold a bit of water retention and be a little bit more bloated during this time. So make sure you're getting that fiber in. And then, yeah, maybe a nice side of avocado or some nuts or something.
That's such good advice. Claudia, thank you.